Greetings, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Doom MIXTAPE. So today I'm playing through another couple maps from the Doom Japanese community project. The first one is called Spaceport Panic with a Panik, and it's by somebody named Doom 68K. I don't know if this person has made literally any other Doom maps. They don't have any note. So all the authors in this particular project had notes in the text file for the project on the download on Doomworld. And this is one of the two authors that didn't put anything in their file. So who knows if they've made anything else. A lot of these levels in the Japanese community project, in spite of their level of polish and interestingness, aren't necessarily by authors who made tons of stuff. This might have been their first exposure into the Doom community. And yeah, I literally know nothing about this author, but I really like this map. It's very short, and it's basically just a few spaces that keep repopulating in various ways. It's very straightforward. It kind of reminds me in the way of some maps that I like I think it's map 27 of the silos of Memento Mori 2, and also some maps in Alt where it's a realistic setting, but it's kind of the realism. That setting is kind of made surreal by some aspect of the detailing. In this case, it's the lighting and just the sort of the angle of the building. There's something very, there's something very moody and very impactful about that. So here you can see me ruining the lighting and how just plain this room looks without it. But this thing isn't going to last for very long, and I'm going to have to keep going back through this room, so you'll see it more. But this map is just really, really simple. All the keys are in those little stations, every single one of them. So you just have to find a way to unlock each of them. Sorry about drop frames recording. I need to I think a lot of the old recordings that I made were in 30 FPS, and I started trying to do 35 FPS because that's what Doom runs in, and maybe that's created some weird issues with, I don't know, my computer is having trouble with it, or just I don't know, or if it's OBS maybe is having issues with 35 FPS as opposed to 30. But anyway, that's my theory, but who knows actually. And yeah, this is basically just like a spaceport, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's a room. It looks almost like a cathedral too, except it's I think of it, maybe it's like a train station. Yeah, okay. So it's like a spaceport. So it's like a train station or something like that. Those seats make me think of Union Station and in LA, or something like that. Those just giant benches. And yeah, outside you have this tech-like structure. It really works because of the lighting, because when you see it at full bright, it doesn't really look like much. But you'll see it. There's also a weird little error, which might be the version of ZDoom that I'm using. But all those little machines there just contain the 3 different keys, and it's basically all I need to do to unlock them is to hit a switch in the side of them. This is a pretty simple map, and if you see me opening up the map screen at some point, you can see that there's only 120 monsters or something in this map. So it's not that many monsters. It seems very straightforward, but it does good things with the encounters to where it feels meaningful. I don't know, I just like a map that has a clear sense of identity in terms of location, and really it feels like the experience is almost sort of shaped incidentally around this location that already exists, rather than it's like a video, it's a video game level that's made to look like a location. It feels like the space actually exists, and your like way through it is almost incidental, which I think is really interesting. People don't tend to approach designing Doom levels that way often, because the whole style of John Romero's like abstract level design, I mean, some of his maps you can say look more maybe like actual realistic settings in some vague sense, but there isn't an emphasis on making locations that seem realistic. Even the Tom Hall maps in Doom 1, which are intended to be more realistic settings, also still feel like they were shaped around a video game. So, I mean, certain like Doom modders and stuff have tried that, but it tends to be an approach that is not as well regarded as the approach of like, you know, fitting something around an experience. But because of that, like, it ends up so that like, I don't know, I have this like general fatigue when playing any sort of levels in a video game, but especially like Doom levels where you get into a general routine and certain things always go a certain way. You can always expect, you know, to encounter this type of room shape in this type of enemy encounter, and, you know, this type of detailing and all that kind of stuff. So when you played like a whole set of that, even, I mean, Japanese Community Project is a good project, but even it can fall into that routine, because that's just a general issue with Doom maps that I have, is that a lot of them are fun and approachable, but can lack like something more higher concept to make it interesting. Having so when you encounter something like this that feels like its own place, and it's your interaction with that space is almost incidental to it, it's more memorable. Even like, and I think some people, what they're looking for in like a video game level is like a good gameplay experience, but for me, I want to like feel like I was in a place that has its own kind of ideas behind it, or its own like I don't know, like logic or whatever to it. And this is definitely one of those maps, and I think it probably helps that the person who made this map was an outsider. You can see, I mean, I think this map is pretty well balanced too. It just gave me, it was pretty easy for me to be able to see that I needed to pick up that invulnerability, and it gave me that when I need to, because I would otherwise be in a little bit of trouble here fighting all these guys. Of course, this map is pretty wide open, so I would have been able to hide or whatever, but it makes it more fun. That's the other thing, like a lot of like contemporary Doom mod people might be like, oh, well, you don't need to place you don't need, I think it's just that like hardcore attitude that really fucking irritates me, of like, oh, well, you don't need to place invulnerability there because, you know, you can just dodge everything and have them infight. And it's like, well, it's actually more fun to put that like invulnerability there, because then you can just like be stupid for a few moments and just run straight into something and do things you can't normally do. So that's the whole point of putting the invulnerability there. It's not because it's like, oh, we think you suck. So, I mean, to some people, I mean, that might be part of it, but it also like makes it interesting in another way. But there's that general approach to like design encounters that can frustrate me with that, like, you know, like the hardcore mindset in modding communities. It's like, well, you don't need to do this thing because you can get, if you're a good enough player, you can get around it. And it's like, well, maybe that's true, but also like, not only are you maybe making it less accessible to somebody by not, you know, putting that little bit of extra health or weaponry or whatever, you're also like taking some incentives. You're forcing people to play in one particular way, and that one way is like continually often enforced. So when you give like players breaks, it gives them another way to like approach a situation, and it lets you work within a different sort of context. And I think that's the most interesting thing. That I think almost that's the best argument for this stuff, even more than like it's more accessible to do that, which I think is true. But I think the accessibility discourse always gets like, locked down in the sort of get good, like this is for real gamers and not, and it's like, it's not even about that. It's like, do you want to just straight up like just chomp on like a lemon or something if you're eating citrus, if you want to like eat a fruit or something, if you're out there being like, oh yeah, I just like regularly just like eat lemons, it's the thing that I do, or something like that. I'm just trying to think of a comparison. It's like, yeah, maybe it's like kind of fun to like do that as like a trick or whatever, but after a certain point it just becomes boring and you want something else to like, it just becomes a slog, like the more that you have to do something like that. And it doesn't make sense to me that you would play something that's supposed to be engaging or fun or amusing or entertaining, and your relationship with it is, it's like, well, I guess it's time to bite the bullet. It's like, why are you doing it? Just like forcing yourself through this drudgery. I don't understand that like attitude towards work approach in games. I don't know, it's quite frustrating to me. Okay, so here we have a little platforming thing, and of course it's made a little bit more frustrating by the fact that there's Cyber Demon right there. He's having trouble hitting us, which is good. I like that you can just like enter this place right from the beginning, but you can't go up those stairs. So you can have that encounter that I had earlier with the Barons and the Hell Knights, which will spawn in more guys in that room, but you can't actually access the health and stuff items that you need to go down there, or access the switches either, so that becomes a problem. So it's not a good idea to go there then, but I like the notion that it gives you a chance to explore that, and you can also go all the way around the toxic, the like lava pit on the other end, and go to the area towards the end of the level, but you can't really do anything there either. Like you can go up and stuff, but you need to activate things with the switches, with the keys that you've picked up in these like 3 little stations here. And 2 of the stations I'm accessing via these doors that are up here, up these stairs, and the other one is I'm accessing via like a ground level. So I don't know, it's just very straightforward. It's like a machine that shows you how it works. Like it opens up its pieces and parts. It's a very like easy to comprehend space once you've been through it enough times, which I think is cool. And yeah, you have to run through to access that space, but the other one I can just go up the stairs from the ground level here outside. And yeah, this map is just a great example of how lighting just changes everything. The dark, moody lighting creates another obstacle in itself. In addition to like the gameplay, maybe some of the difficulty of these encounters. I wouldn't say that this is a super difficult map, but you don't necessarily expect to continually go through a space that might be repopulating monsters as many times as this one does. And so the part of the difficulty is figuring out, is just navigating through the darkness. And one major thing that I was able to circumvent right away, because this area is pretty scary the first time that you go through it, is that there's a bunch of hit scanner chain gunners and stuff in this room, and so it's very like hot in terms of action. There's a lot going on, and it's real difficult. But so presumably you might die, but right towards around the right side of like where you enter into that room for the first time, there's a what's its name, blur sphere, which actually is actually really, really, really useful in this map because you're navigating in low light, and right at the beginning you're dealing with a lot of chain gunners. So this is something you might have to take multiple times and die in order to understand how to approach it. Once you've once you've died once or twice. So I think that's interesting. I guess it's like something that's associated with Sandy Peterson's designs. Although I think it's more comprehensible here. I think Sandy Peterson's levels are quite random, and there isn't necessarily like a clear logic to it. Whereas here, I think it's the space there's like an architectural integrity or whatever. The space stays the same. It doesn't like shift or change necessarily. It's just the way that you move through the space is different. I also like the trick of the fact that those little benches are all like just this completely dark black texture, whereas like you might expect that the reason that they're that way is because there's no lighting on them. But then when you have the light amplification visor on, you can actually see that that it's just a dark black texture, which is a kind of a neat little trick, I think, that I've seen people do before in terms of just using that in like ceilings or floors in order to just give like a black void or whatever. And there's different ways that you can achieve that effect, but it creates a slightly different like a look to it. Oh, that's okay. So this is right where I paused. There is where I picked up that secret with that blur sphere. So yeah, this is really, you can see like I can go straight around back to either side of the level here. It's real basic in terms of what this map is. There's no secret. I mean, there's secrets in this map, but there's nothing you really haven't seen, or there's no secret to the way the space works, which I think combined with the fact that things are low light and repopulating really works, because it's almost like putting everything out in the open makes it creepier or more ominous in a way. It gives, there's something about that it doesn't have to like severely change the space in order for that effect to be part of the experience, which I think is really cool. So yeah, we're at the end now. That was a good map. It's a really good length for a map. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It just does what it needs to do, and then you're out of the map, which I think is really an underrated approach. Okay, so here's another one. This one is maybe more well known. The name of the author is burabojunior, who actually made a lot of maps in this set, but this is probably the most memorable of theirs. They also made a set called what was it? I think it's called like Space Plant or something. What is it called? I'm gonna look. I'm just gonna read what they say in the description. This is my first time in a PWAD. To be honest, I never thought people would enjoy my maps. I joined in through pure coincidence. 2 years ago, I visited tasurdcacocaco's website. That's the person who organized this project, who was a big Doom speedrunner. And an item named JPCP. I thought the JPCP meant that it was Japanese Community Project. I got really excited since I could show my maps there. Slightly off topic, but it's been about 9 years since I started using Doom editors like Deep Sea and Doom Builder. I gained confidence that my maps hold good in the world by taking part in JPCP. Someday I'd like to make a PWAD called Water Spirit. So that PWAD does exist. You can find it. I think it was released, I don't know, like maybe a year or two after this came out. And then this is, until then, see you, bye. So he made a bunch of maps for this set, and they're all pretty solid, but they do tend to fall into similar tropes with design. And this one kind of does feel similar to some of his other maps, but This one has a much more clear and interesting goal. So the whole green style of it is really, I mean, this is a really, really pretty looking map. This is up there with, a lot of those slaughter maps in sets like Sunder or whatever that really go for this spectacle. But it's not actually a slaughter map. What you do in this map is actually quite interesting. You have to kill the commander keens that are throughout this map, and it is kind of like a scavenger hunt in that way, but it's actually pretty good at indicating where they are. So there's like little candles that always indicate where the keens are, but then also if you look, so you can see the candle there that was right in front of that, so that's how I know where one of those guys are. And this one you could see it was locked off, so now I can actually hit it once I hit that switch. And you can see on the map there was a little arrow that said lift there, so the map tells you, it indicates all the points where these things are, which might take some of the scavenger hunt element out of it, but actually makes it really essential, because this map would be so frustrating to play otherwise, especially because similar textures are being used, being shot at by a cyber demon, who I never even tried and kill this guy, because I don't know, it just never think to do it. And this is another map that doesn't necessarily have a lot of monsters. It's really just going to a few different areas and exploring and looking for that commander keen. And I do pick up one key at some point, and you can see you'll see it on the map screen later. You can see there's a door that it points to, and that's the door that'll open it up, and it's labeled as Keen Door on the map, which is good, because I played this map through earlier, and I didn't think to look at the auto map, and it was sort of like, I was like, how the hell do I find all this stuff? This is confusing. That kind of made me dislike the map. And then I looked on the auto map, and I realized all this stuff was actually labeled. And the fact that the designer actually really thought to do that makes the map infinitely more bearable. Once you know that exists, you can consult it. I mean, that's the problem with any Doom map, is that you have to basically make your own rules per map. Using it as a template, there are certain things that maybe it's not designed very well to do, so you sort of have to work around this idea of scripting, for example. A Z-Doom set might be able to switch camera and show you a place that opened up, but normally if you're a designer, you're just going to have to find ways to let the player know that when you hit certain switches, or when you in this case kill these commander keens, that something is going to happen then. And marking it on the auto map, especially given the nature of this map where it really is like a scavenger hunt, is not a bad way to do it. I mean, there are other ways to do it, in always making sure that players are teleported back to areas after they unlock something, to where that thing that was unlocked was, or maybe the thing that was unlocked was right in front of them, or is visible in some way so that they can see it go down, and then figure out how to go back there. There's different ways to do it. Here's a little portal. This will warp me to another area of the map. I'm basically ignoring it right now, but it's actually a nice little fast travel thing. So here the commander keens are a little bit more well hidden. There's one to the right, and then there's another one kind of on the ceiling. So you do have to sort of look for them. They're not all hidden in the same kind of little slots or whatever, but it's kind of nice. It makes you pay more attention to the surroundings that you're in. And the way that you're approaching them is not necessarily the way that you would normally approach a Doom map, which is you're running from one area, to get to the key to go to the next area. You actually have to pay attention and look at the map and, figure out where these things are, which I really like. It's a skill that, like I said, usually in this game, it's all about just pushing ahead to the next thing. And because of that, I think both of the maps that I showed here were actually really good at recontextualizing spaces. Excuse me, so that you go through them multiple times, so that you have more of a relationship with that space. I mean, one of the big complaints about Doom when it came out is like, in addition to the it's such a sad thing that you can't talk to monsters in this game and all that kind of stuff, that your only interaction with the world is like shooting stuff. So that was one common complaint, especially after like Doom clones became so widespread popular. The other complaint is that it's all these like one-off levels. And the kind of interesting thing about a Metroidvania or something like that is that places that you revisit can change over time. There's like, or just a general hub setting. You have a different relationship with the place the more that you go back through it. RPG games are sort of this way too. Whereas in Doom, basically everything is designed to be a one-off. You're always going to the next level. It just, basically throws, it might as well just like throw away that level once you've been through it. And so a lot of the design is just getting you through that space until you get to the next thing. It's like a slideshow in some way in terms of the way that you interact with the space. You just have to figure out real basic quick stuff, and then you go on to the next thing, which makes it easier to play community maps or something in, because I can spend a little bit of time with something, and I can be like, oh, okay, this is fine, or whatever, and then I can move on to the next thing, and I don't have to spend a lot of my time doing it and scrutinizing this thing, and dealing with maybe some of the impacts of a bad or tedious like design, or just uninspired, I think is always the worst thing for me, things that are just totally uninspired. But then if there is something that that is more interesting, sometimes you want to be able to engage with it a little more deeply. So a way through that is like designing these different sort of routes or paths through a level, so you're not just doing, oh, I'm going to pick up the red key and then I'm going to pick up this thing, because that's all stuff that's so archaic in terms of design language. Like most games now, there's a story or something, you move from one space to a next, and there's some reason why you unlock a space. It's connected via some sort of plot reason. They don't just give you the red key, the blue key, and then you move on to the next space. Even in Metroidvanias, they usually give you a map, and the areas might have specific names or things like that. So that like red key, blue key thing is just not something that people do anymore. So this is kind of a way to maybe get around that, in terms of like this map does have a yellow key that you use to unlock one area, but the more important aspect of this map is that like little scavenger hunt thing, which is shown by the auto maps. So it gives you a different way to approach moving through a space, and having a lot of different approaches can kind of be really surprising and fun in Doom, because you tend to expect that you're going to move through a space the same way. I always like things that kind of subvert that idea of this being like a fast action game where you just go from one place to another, and force you to engage in a few different ways with the space, and in order to like really know it. Here I warped back to the beginning, but then there was a teleporter that quickly moved me back to this area, so that I didn't have to go through like running over those platforms that I had to do at the beginning. So I thought that was nice, because like that is a nice intro to the map, running these like high flying platforms, but it's not something you necessarily want to revisit. This is another map also where everything is just out in the open. You're in a giant like cavern, and basically you have access. You don't have access, but like all of the map is in one contiguous setting. You might teleport from one place to another to get somewhere, but everything is out in the open right at the beginning, which again, another kind of cool architectural integrity thing, because it also allows this opportunity for a lot of this stuff, which is basically just decorative, but to create that effect of overall that you're in one big space, kind of creates this sense of like vastness. And so even just the relationship, like if this was a black void, or this was like, or these areas were cut off from each other more explicitly and were walled off, the way that you would approach it would be completely and utterly different. So that's like something that is cool to think about in terms of it's an effect that, you know, a lot of older Doom maps really couldn't do, but is introduced by you know, increased limits on source ports and things like that, to where you can really create that effect and create a space that people want to be in and they want to move through because it's so kind of pretty looking. And you know, even if this map didn't have the interesting approach to the Commander Canes and stuff, the fact that it is really pretty is like a reason in itself to want to play something like this, which I think is the appeal of a lot of those like slaughter maps that are much more focused on, you know, pretty environments and lots of super difficult combat. Is having that pretty scenery and stuff is a way to give players something to feel good about in that space, and especially as over time your relationship with the space changes and monsters start to thin out, or you start to see like the different places that you can move through in the space, and like, you know, sort of like, I guess, like choke points or things that are places that are better to fight certain monsters or things like that. Your relationship with the space changes, and there is a very satisfying feeling when you end those maps at the end and you're just walking through all these corpses, you know, and that's usually the moment when they unleash the archvile. There is something very sad. It's like going to a concert or something. And you know, it's at the end, and like, and just everything, it's a very cathartic experience. And then, you know, in some way, usually the designer gets the last laugh by unleashing a cyber demon or an archvile or whatever. The thing is, like, I think people, and I think it's a good design recipe idea, but I think people tend to go for that catharsis a lot, without really thinking about, like, maybe I don't want to do this, like, you know, 20 times or whatever, or even like 5 times in a row. Like, maybe I want my relationship to this to be completely different, like, and I don't want to have to like continually have the same kind of experience. Maybe it's just me, like, but I tend to like variety and unpredictability, and things that subvert my expectations or are doing something that's one step further. And like I said, the thing I like about this map is that, you know, it's still like fun and engaging combat wise and all that kind of stuff. But it's also kind of a scavenger hunt, but it's also this like very pretty set piece. And it's all of those things. And I think it makes it a much more interesting and sort of rich place to revisit, which is really nice. I mean, even if like I did actually confuse some areas in this map for one of burabojunior's other maps, because like there's some similar design ideas. A lot of his maps are more sort of futuristic seeming, but this is the one that's like the most aesthetically pleasing, because he sticks mostly to you know, this palette of like bright neon green, and like a grayish color, and like, you know, black or gray. So I think like that limited palette makes the setting really work really well. But and some of his other maps don't necessarily have that. But I don't know. It's I think his maps are all pretty good. They definitely like hold the set together more so than anybody else. Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to think of other things to say. I like that thing in the center. It does give me the impression that that's like some kind of invisible staircase, because sometimes I think you can do that. I've definitely seen designers like create like some kind of, you know, weird little staircase with that kind of thing where you can climb up to an area that you don't necessarily think you can climb up. I don't know like how exactly you do that. I mean, I know how you do like the 3D bridges and stuff, but I don't know how you make a staircase with that. But I have seen people do that. But yeah, so it's mostly just there for effect, I guess. But that teleporter that I mentioned, right now I'm looking for one of the keys. That's right there. I keep thinking it's up, but it's actually right there. That teleporter I mentioned earlier goes to the area that I was in earlier. So it's a nice like little fast travel thing. And yeah, this is like a timed thing, so it adds another little element to this scavenger hunt where you have to get somewhere in a certain amount of time. There's nothing particularly hard about shooting the keys. It's more like a reward or something, I guess. But yeah, I like that. It's a feature that's also in Doom 2, but was mostly a joke, and it being taken seriously as like something that you have to do in order to complete the map here is something that I really like. I really like it when designers can use the like Wolfenstein enemies seriously too. Like Alt uses some of them, and I've seen other sets that manage to use the Wolfenstein enemies in a way that like doesn't feel like a total joke. And I think that's like the mark of somebody who's really creative and is really good at working with the pieces that they have. I think I said before that Japanese community project was made with I should say one thing here is you pick up the BFG, and this is a place where you'd expect a lot of monsters to spawn in here, but actually nothing happens, and I kind of like that because you don't always want something like that to happen. And it doesn't always need to happen. Yeah, the last candle to hit is like right where I was just standing. So I'm going to have to come back there to get that one. But what was I going to say? Oh my god, I forgot what I was going to say. I was talking about ... Well, I'm sure I'll remember. That's embarrassing. See, I could totally go back in this video and remember exactly what I was talking about, and someone would be really annoyed that I didn't finish talking about that. Oh, one thing I did want to mention is the fact that this gives you tons of radiation suits, which is fun. You know, I'm glad that it does that. It makes it so that it's very unlikely that you'll run out. But still there's like a little strategy to, you know, finding where the radiation suits are to pick them up. Yeah. So I feel like this gives you a break in multiple ways. Like it could be stingy on radiation suits. It could not have that teleporter there at the beginning that brings you back into this area. And that's the door I'm trying to open. I'm just missing one right now. The one that I mentioned earlier. It could, not mark stuff on the auto map. And it would still be an interesting level, but that stuff makes it so much more accessible and makes it like a more kind of engaging experience to me. Because it's like telling me that the designer knows what they're doing, you know? And it's really trying to get you to see that and appreciate that, and not just that they're slapping something in and don't like really fully understand how players are going to move through that space and approach that. There's definitely a lot of potential for players to find something to be mean-spirited, and I mean a lot of stuff that I consider well designed, there still has a lot of people who are like, what the hell? But I think giving players a break in one or two ways at the very least is like tends to be is like a good call, especially when you have something else that is more high concept or whatever in it. That like contrast of things, it's just like it's like you're making a dish or whatever. You're making food. You want maybe things to be spicy, but you want them to be a little sweet, and you want them to be a little maybe like have like umami texture in them or something. You want like different things going on in a dish, and I feel that you want that balance of things too, and I feel that way with like a lot of Doom maps or just anything really, any sort of design thing. It's finding that balance is like really really difficult. But when people get closer to that, especially like amateurs here who haven't made anything out, presumably haven't made anything professionally, and certainly haven't like made anything other stuff in the Doom community, when they're able to get it right and when so many other people get it wrong, like I appreciate that so much more, because there's just a lot of like tired sort of bullshit that that people who have experience will do and can get away with, that like amateurs don't tend to be given nearly as much of a chance, because the internet can be quite nasty with that stuff. So when somebody does pull something off, and it's done in a really really good way, it always it's always that much more impressive to me. I think people should be celebrated and congratulated for that. Here's this nice little like, so like these kind of details can often be sort of copy pasted or whatever, in order to create impressive looking vistas. But because this is like the one central area that has tons of torches and stuff in it, it feels important. So it feels important. It feels reasonable to have like a billion torches here to sort of label this as like this important shrine area. I think I can teleport back. I'm not sure that this is actually a point of no return, but I love this exit too. It's very similar to the beginning of the map where there's this platform going up and down. I actually thought I was back at the beginning of the map for a second, but that teleporter in front is the exit. But you can actually go down. You might be able to warp back to the beginning of the map if you just go down in that toxic pit. I didn't realize that this was the exit right here in the center, but you can also see the way that the it's labeled on the map sort of indicates that it's probably going to be the exit, because it's like a diamond-shaped little platform or whatever. So I totally forgot what I was talking about in that earlier point. And I'm sure I'll remember when I rewatch this video. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed it. And that's probably it from the Japanese community project. I'm not sure exactly what I'll cover next, but it's sort of been on and off, and I might do more podcast stuff the next month or so. But hopefully you appreciated this. Oh, and I liked how the previous area that we were in sort of echoes what you end up getting to here. Okay, bye.